Freedom, celebrating extraordinary lives engaged in the struggle for human dignity. Today, we're talking with author and illustrator ABryan. He has just published an amazing book, Freedom Over Me, which imagines the lives of 11 slaves. Ashley, can you tell us how you came to write this book?
It's really interesting, Susan. You know, over 10 years ago, there was an auction at the Northeast Harbor Neighborhood House. Now, Jerry Miller every month sent out an auction thing. That auction card he sent out said, Civil War documents and slave-related papers. When I saw that, I went to that. Now, there's only a small group of collectors, antique dealers, and all. Generally, his sales of estates, there are a lot of things people are offering, so many people come, small group. I bid on those slave auction papers, and I got about 20 documents of slaves for sale. And those documents, those papers, if this sale had been in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, all of the universities and museums would have been after those papers. I was there bidding, and I was able to get about 20 papers of the sale of slaves and other items of an estate. But slaves, the one I chose, the one document, lists only the slave's name and a price, with the hogs, the cotton, the cows.
Wow. Tell me about your process as you wrote the stories of these people.
The interesting thing for me was it's completely fictional. I did not do the research a sociologist would do. Finding the Fairchild's estate, the listing, what happened to these people? Did they follow these names in any way? I just had the name and a price. What I did was I gave everyone a job as a cook, a carpenter, a seamstress, and aged. They listed no age, because very often in the slave documents, they'll have an estimated age. All right. I took just those names of the 11 and I gave them an age and a profession, and then I do a painting. I said, I have to do a portrait. I did 11 portraits. I used the images came to me from my family and close friends. When I had done the portraits, I say, they were close now. I looked at them and asked them, would you tell me who you are? Where do you come from? What is your work? What is your background? And after they told me that, I said, what are your dreams if you were not a slave? What would your dreams be? So each of the 11 in the story that I've written covers many aspects of slavery through the 11, but each one first tells who he or she is, where they come from, what is the background, and then what is their dream? What is your dream? Everyone, no matter who you are, has some dream of what you would like to be, what would you like to realize in life. And in making them human, the hitting upon that idea of asking them, what would your dream be, made them even more alive to me.
And I love how on the page where you introduce them with their name that they were given by...
Yes, the slave owners.
The slave owners. The portraits are very spare. And then on the dream pages, there's so much color.
Yeah. It opens in color, yeah.
Wonderful.
And that was the good work of my designer, a wonderful person, Ann Bobko. Both she and my editor, Caitlin Louie, are fantastic people in their work in the field. And they understand, have known me for many, many years working with me. And after I would give Ann the portrait on the slave document, we talked about the typography. And then she would begin to set the color for that. And when I did the painting of the dream, she would choose the color on which that poem would go. And throughout that book, what she opened up in terms of the dream gives such a rich feeling of color and vitality through the whole book. And she used a number of the documents, which is not the document of the Fairchild's estate, in the design throughout the book. It was her imagination and ingenuity which makes it such a specially presented work. and makes it so moving and how beautifully it's designed.
It is beautifully designed.
Yes.
Really, the whole package is just...
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed
absolutely.
and everything to me that... I felt, in the back of the book where they have the copyright, they have credit, and her name is in book designer Anne Bobko. I said, that should be in capitals.
Another thing that caught my eye immediately, your title comes from one of my favorite spirituals, Oh Freedom.
Oh, freedom over me. Yeah.
Could you sing Oh Freedom?
Well, the thing that it was very popular civil rights times, and my editor indicates that at the back. Oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. And that was sung all throughout the time. And my editor noted that the spirituals were created at their time meaningfully, but they've been taken over in contemporary times. And during the civil rights, it was one of the hymns that always was being sung.
Yes.
It's a strengthening song, is a way of keeping the whole spirit up and going. And that's why among the slaves, I have two of them who are the song people, and they open up the spirit of life and feeling that keeps a very active program of survival of the slaves.
That was something that really struck me reading it, that each of the people you wrote about had found a way to keep their spirits alive in this horrible situation. Yes. And there was a tie, in many cases, to their previous life in Africa before they were captured. And I thought it was really interesting that you gave them names.
The African names. That was important to me because when they were bought on the auction block, they were given names like Betty, Jane, Stephen, John. But I wanted it to be known that these are people who had a name from their ancestries and background. And so I introduced for them the African name as well. Betty, the cook, is that's her name, but then what is her name? Mariama or so. And give them the African names throughout. It meant a lot to me that they often use their African names where the owners would call them the English name that they had given them when they were bought at auction.
Right, and I thought it was wonderful also that even Dora, the young girl who had been born... They jumped the broom because that was the only recognition. There was no formal legal recognition of marriage, but the slaves brought that custom from Africa of jumping the broom as an initiation into marriage, and they carried that here. And the slaves on the plantations would accept and recognize that this is a couple, and whatever came of other children. Now, at any sale, they often were just separated, the husband one way, the wife another, the child. There was no recognition of it, just as there was no recognition of them as human beings. Yes. And I thought it was wonderful that they gave Dora an African name also.
Yes, so. The mother, the father, and Dora would have an African name as well as the English name that the owners would give them.
Yeah.